Pat Windrow, sitting here at the Cable Easel with a program which is devoted to painting and drawing from life. When I do still lives, I bring the still life into the studio and flower arrangements into the studio, but when landscapes are on the bill, it's done by going out with a video camera and shooting a scene for 40 or 45 minutes and then bringing it back here and projecting it onto a monitor, which is what anybody who has a video camera is able to do themselves. So it's a piece of technology which you may be able to tap into under your own resources and probably find yourself relieved of the need to go out and fight the elements and changing weather patterns. And here it is. This particular scene is down on the eastern end of Long Island. It's a potato farm. If there's anything more typical of Long Island, I don't know what it is, besides possibly the Montauk Lighthouse and Fire Island. But here it is, a study in texture. Also a study in the simple composition, which landscape painting ought to always remain as simple as possible, because landscapes tend to want to cover large areas at one time, and the simpler the better. It's more easily understood by the eye upon living with, and if you want a landscape, it should be something that you can stand to live with and walk past every single day. This has got all sorts of elements going for it. As you can see from the monitor, movement is of course essential, because in this drought, and how ironic a drought is at this time during probably the worst flood of the century in the middle of this country, Long Island and the eastern seaboard is experiencing a rather devastating drought. It's not devastating yet, but it certainly is in bad shape. And so these sprinklers are going full blast now to try to save the crops. I don't know which probably could be categorized as worse, is a drought or a flood, but I have a feeling that it's definitely a flood, because there's nowhere for the water to go. At least here we can bring the water in. That is obviously a potato crop, and Long Island, of course, has a worldwide reputation for having the finest potatoes anywhere. Even that includes Russia. So here we have a blank canvas. I've tinted it dark just to tell you that you don't always have to work with a white one. You can see how dark it is. And I'm working on, well, this is approximately a 14 by 18 canvas, and I'm going to lay it out the way I always do from life. I find the horizon more than most of the time, and today the horizon is going to be this rather lovely wavy line, which is a little bit higher in the composition than dead center. A dead center is something to avoid anytime you do a horizon, either a little bit above the center or a little bit below for interest. Now, Long Island is a flat piece of land, but once in a while there are swells in it, and painters are extremely grateful for those swells. And here is one of them. The diagonal line, which I'm always talking about, which is the line that all landscape painters look for, is because it gives a dimension and depth to a composition. So right away with two lines, we have a landscape composition, the horizon and the line leading into the picture. The rest of it is what you might just call embroidery. Here is the line of trees in the distance, and this is the third line. So when I said simple, I certainly am illustrating how simple this composition is. Over here is a little sort of a bush interrupting this line. But there is the basic pattern of this composition. 3 lines. We live in an area where the flatness is emphasized just about every time you turn around. The sea is flat against the horizon, the land is flat most of the time, and so when you do go out looking for a place to paint, by all means find something with maybe a slight relieving of that flatness. Here, going off into the distance, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to lay this out, this is the water system, this enormous sprinkler, bisects the distant rise in that hill, and that's the point of reference for the size of this particular sprinkler. These wonderful wheels that carry the hoses, which are extremely heavy because they're such tremendous length, are what make this composition quite interesting. First of all, it's a document to tell you how in 1993 crops were watered. It's possible that with technology being what it is and going by such quick leaps and bounds, that this kind of technology will be gone in a number of decades, and so this painting would in fact be a document. This is the way you would lay out the perspective of these wheels. They would follow the line so that they become smaller as they go into the distance. These are things that are should be understood before you even begin to paint them. I'm going to draw them anyway. I will be painting over them, but this is to illustrate how you go about placing these items, which have to actually be these motifs, which actually have to be quite accurate in order for the viewer to comprehend what is happening. And the further away an object becomes, if it's in repetition, the smaller it becomes and the closer it becomes. And so these wheels will continue into the distance until they disappear, and then another set of them begins to manifest itself way off into the distance, somewhere in the middle of the field, and that's a little bit bigger. And so these lines continue to form a pattern of the water, of the spraying of the water. So for the most, for most of the information that you need, here's the middle of this wheel, and here is the hose which is leading into another diagonal which leads the eye right into the picture. These elements are something that you ought to know in order to not be totally confused by what you're looking at. You may never stop at a composition like this, but then again you may find yourself interested. And so I always feel that it's important to give you the general information of how to do this. This particular set of wheels goes off and goes down follows the pattern of the land, and in a little depression in the land, the water sprinkler follows that depression in the land. So here is the general feeling of composition. Now, visible only very slightly. I'm going to start to paint now, and here's my trusty palette knife. I'm going to use a combination of palette knife and brush. The palette knife is for a reason. As I've said many, many times before, it's for speed. Speed is what we have to think about, not for the trickiness of being able to paint fast. And there are a lot of shows that sometimes boast about the fact that this painting can be done in 43 minutes and you'll have a masterpiece that'll last all your life. Well, that's okay for chutzpah, but I don't think that it really applies to fine art. What you want to do is to work with the available light when you're out there. And in order to work quickly when you're out there, you have to have techniques which are going to cover a large area very quickly. So here I am, I'm going to use quick drying white. I used the flake white before, and I realized that I have to use the quick drying white because I need to be able to have the background rather quickly set, because in part 2 of this program I'm going to be putting the water, the sprinkling, spraying water, which is the whole point of this composition and this painting and this study, which in its way is going to want to be something of a document, as I said before, a recording of what it is that is happening in this day and age, to make it cliche. So I'm mixing right on the canvas, having said to you a number of times that you don't have to schlep a whole bunch of equipment with you when you're out there painting on location. The less you carry, the better. The less tiring, the less things you'll forget, and the more efficient your whole trip will be. I'm covering this area here. I've mixed some cerulean blue, some of my quick drying white, and a touch of something that they foolishly called turquoise. Turquoise is not really a color, it's a gem, but it does apply to a color many times. Fashion has picked up the word turquoise and so on. Interior decorating has picked it up, so that's okay. And the paint company has picked up the word turquoise also. Here is the application of the background, which is the sky in this particular instance, and then playing in that sky is the summer clouds, which tend to be peach-colored. In the summertime on Long Island, for reasons which I'm not even going to question, the skies become wonderfully populated with peach-colored clouds. I think that anybody who goes out to observe the skies in the summertime, particular days will show you that those peach-colored clouds are very typical of this island. I've seen them before, but particularly here, they are very typical. Typically here, they're typical. Well, we repeat ourselves many times for emphasis, and sometimes because you talk like a magpie, and sometimes you repeat yourself. I'm going to smooth this sky out with a brush because the palette knife technique is okay, but I want to put my clouds on top of it. And the peach-colored clouds, I believe that if anybody were to look out on a very clear day in this July and August and maybe part of September period of the year, you will find that the peach-colored clouds are really typical. And I live with some of these paintings of mine, and I must say that when I see these clouds, summertime clouds, I feel really very nostalgic for these beautiful color schemes that take place at this time of year. As you know, I am very fond of all the times of year, the winter time being particularly enchanting to me because of this simplicity of the color. But boy, when you talk about the color of summer, the color of summer, I suppose, is just about as seductive, I think, as anything can be. All kinds of things happen in the summertime, and the growth here in the east, I can tell you that in Arizona you do not find the lushness that is here in the east. Well, here are some peachy tones on my palette knife, and let's see whether or not that's going to work. I'm going to sort of pull this palette knife across the sky, hoping that the colors are not too subtle for transmission. Sometimes the colors are very subtle and you lose it in the transmission. However, here is a sort of oops, too much pink. Let me get rid of that. Here is the what I would say is my favorite way of using the palette knife technique to get the sort of spontaneous cloud formations that take place and that change so quickly that actually you do not have to agonize over the form of a cloud, because in a few moments it's different anyway. So, but what I'm doing here is applying something called Impressionism. And if anybody ever wondered what Impressionism was, I suppose this is the best way to illustrate it, that you will do the impression of these pink clouds on this bright summer sky, this bright blue summer sky. In the wintertime, those clouds that have some color in them usually only take place at sunset. And then they're much more mauve. All of these are observations that I've made over the years because I look at the sky a great deal, and I also paint it a lot. And I can tell you right now that the minute you start observing the sky and its colors, you will find yourself having the eye of a painter. So here is the general feeling about how these clouds will look, and I'm not going to work at these. I'm just going to leave them there. And it's nice to have some texture, because oil painting is, after all, bumpy, and it should not be worked to death. Here is now you can just forget about this. This is done. And working down now towards the distance, I'm going to change to a brush. This is another interpretive part of my showing you how to do landscape painting. It's deliberate strokes, rather than to just sort of whack at the canvas with a color and say, well, now that doesn't look too bad. That's something that I'm trying to avoid at all costs. Not something that doesn't look too bad, but something that actually tells the story. Here is this blob is called sap green, and this one is called yellow greens. Those are the only two greens that I'm willing to squeeze out of a tube. All the other greens are really deadly. And you always subdue these manufactured greens, and I'm subduing them here with what is called burnt sienna. So hoping that this is a dark enough selection here, I will start to put this distant land mass with all these trees way off there with deliberate strokes, not with a 4-inch brush, please, but with dabbings and some concern with the change of color. This is not color numbers. This is definitely observational painting, and it also means that you are there picking up the differences that take place in landscapes as the sun moves. And as you can see, the change of color happens here and there. Darkness comes in because shadows hit it. And you can also say that this painting is going to be a study in textures. The texture of the potato field and also the texture of the distant trees, which are very typical of Long Island. Not that there aren't trees all over America, but the way they grow here on bluffs and on little rises of the land in the distance and separating fields is really very typical. Well, having made this kind of a topographical comment, I'll take a break for just a moment. I need to squeeze out some more white, so don't go too far away. More minutes of this part one of a study of a potato field here on Long Island, and to maybe talk about the crops of this wonderful place, and to at the same time as you do these things, thoughts enter my head anyway as I'm doing them, and with thoughts come imaginative ideas. So as I was working on the distance here where the trees are, it's always darker down by at the bottom of a row of trees because of such intense shadows that the trees are casting, and so it's always extremely dark down there. A little thing to remember, in case when you're out there and you wonder what you look at, if it looks all sort of green, look very carefully and see whether or not it is all sort of green. The chances are that it's going to be shaded in many ways, even though it appears to just be all green, dark green. But down below, at the foot of on the ground level of these large wooded areas, it's always much darker. So there is very little sun being cast on that landmass, but there are a few light spots that are being picked up by the sunshine, and they're always on the proper side. Be sure that you're aware of the fact that if you're looking in a certain direction, the sun is hitting them on that particular side of the trees. Everything has got some wonderful logical explanation, including the slight shadows on the sides of trees in a very long distance away. Somebody will always call you on it if you don't do that. They will always have some remark to make that you haven't got the light on the proper side of the trees. So that's the chance that we take when we expose our activities in front of other people to judge them. But anyway, we all survive it very nicely. And here, let me go on to the next phase of this, working towards the foreground. The complication of doing the water sprinkling system is going to come in part 2, which means that at that point it's going to have to be sort of technical. And there's nothing wrong with technical, because technical is a form of a documentation of a particular scene. Here I'm going to use some of the pink cloud color that I mixed, and because I don't believe that one should waste one tiny bit of any of these paints, and I'm going to mix that amber tone, which is the color of that field in the distance. Now, it would seem to me, I'm sort of guessing at this, but the fact that that field is somewhat tan makes me think, and that's why I said I think about these things as I'm doing this, makes me think that a harvest has taken place on that particular field. Maybe somebody has just finished cutting a field of hay, and this is the result of a field of hay cut down with the drought doing its job and turning everything to well, what is called yellow ochre tone. Down in Virginia, where I reside most of the time, there is a rather severe lack of water as well. The entire Shenandoah Valley is really desperate for water, which, as I said earlier, there is such an irony in this enormous country that one area is literally devastated by the fact that there is no water, and the other one is equally as devastated with too much of it. Let us really hope that people who are concerned about this will do what they can to, well, possibly to send some help. If you possibly can, find out to whom do you send help. They're going to need every moment of help, and every gesture is going to be vitally important to an awful lot of people out there. So the drought here is doing its job, but as I think I remarked earlier, it's probably better to have this than it is to have the flooding. Here is a painting in progress. A lot has to be put in from now on. The texture that is going to take place in the distance there, I notice on the monitor there is a sort of a darker area here, probably some kind of a depression in the ground, and it's always very important to pay attention to these things, because they make, first of all, for interest, and secondly, if you are in fact recording a particular place, it's better to be accurate, and it all makes for the general interest, and also for a better color scheme rather than just a flat area of yellow ochre. You can put in the shadowy tones that come from land rising and falling and casting shadows upon itself. So now I'm going to, I'm not quite sure how long we're going to be spending on this, but I've got some blue left over from the sky, and with that I'm going to build some of the green. To remember that things, as they recede into the distance, assume a very flattened out texture. In other words, you're not going to see the detail on this potato field far away as you're going to see the texture as it comes towards you. So I've just added some of the sap green to the sky blue, and I'm wondering whether or not I can find if this is going to be the proper color scheme. It looks to me like it might need a touch of, don't fade at this, a touch of purple to subdue that green. Green having an opposite, which is purple, is what you temper the tones of color with, the opposite colors on the color wheel. So as you can, if you have all this information at hand, well, then you're ahead of the game. If you need to learn about it through trial and error, well, that's the way I did it, because I am totally self-taught, and a color wheel was something which I thought was only for sale in an art store, and certainly not to be used as information when I first started painting. And so you pick up all these things as you go along, but a little bit of information never hurt, and there is a possibility that you will need it in the future. Here is a general idea of how you can begin to apply the color. As I say, it becomes a little bit less distinct in the distance. However, I'm going to add some color just back here because I find that it's a little bit too pale, and that's why working from life is far easier than working from your imagination. I'm not sure that the human mind can have such total recall visually. Some people claim that it does, but I would question that. Besides that, applying this darker green to darken some of this tone that I put on before is giving it a texture, which is what everybody would like to really find in paintings, is the oil painting texture. Watercolors has no texture, but it has all that wonderful juicy look about it that comes with using water and having it flowing on the paper, whereas with oils, you expect and want to find the bumpy texture of oils. And the way you do that is by deliberate strokes and by observing what you're seeing and trying to give an impression. Now, a lot of people say you're such a realist painter. Well, I am, but there's also a lot of impressionism in what I do, namely such as I did with the pink clouds just a moment ago. I do interpret, but I'm trying to be faithful, first of all, to the color. I find that an awful lot of instructional programs do not pay that much attention to color. There is one particular show in which there are exactly 5 colors on the palette. Well, that would be, to me, far more of a challenge, I suppose, than to rely upon some of the more colors on the palette. But I do believe that you'd have to be an absolute wizard to be able to get something genuinely interesting with just 5 colors on the palette. That means the 3 primary colors and black and white. Believe me, there's need for a few more than those. I'm going to do a primary color study one of these days very soon, and so if you are wondering what primary colors are, and if you're perplexed by color in general, by all means, keep finding when this easel program is coming on, and you'll, I'm sure, that find some interest in my telling you about primary colors. I'm working towards the foreground. The foreground is considerably darker than the distance one because it has, first of all, it has more shadows, and secondly, it has more detail. And the second part of this program is going to attend to really very intimate details, such as the sprinkler system and the way you would do the texture in the foreground of this potato field. I'm going to add some of this very obstinate ultramarine blue to see if I can get a deeper tone, because on top of this tone is going to go the brush strokes for the potato plants that are in the foreground, which are important to show that they are not bamboo or corn or any other growing material, that if you call this a potato field, your foreground had jolly well better look like potato field, otherwise your efforts have been, well, almost wasted. So I'm preparing the foreground here to receive all the details of the potato field. It's possible that it will not be as interesting as it is to me because I'm doing it, but it also might be quite instructional. Well, having gotten the signal that there's only a minute left, I suppose I'd best remind you that this is part 1 of a study of a potato field here on Long Island. And I hope that you got something out of it, and I hope that you can find time to go out and ride around the amazing park. This is on the east end of Long Island in the South Fork. So by all means, peruse this area. You'll find it full of gifts. Tune in again. Thanks for watching this time. Bye-bye.